have six,
Yeah.
I already did. Oh,
I don't know
noise.
that anybody heard you.
we have 6 trustees present. Our president will be joining us shortly. We could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
We don't have anybody signed up for public forum. Our superintendent's report will be moved down to 9:4. We're moving it down to after the shack. We're going to begin with closed session as authorized by 551.071/551.074 of the Texas Government Code for discussion regarding construction renovations of district campuses and level 3 grievance of Michael Villapondo, and discussion regarding rescission of accepted resignation submitted by Carolyn Rocha.
are back from closed session, and I think we're hopping around a bit. So we're at item 7 first, and then we'll go to Mr. Cruz, who's ready. But I'll entertain a motion on 7A. Ms. Halsey.
I move to direct the superintendent to come up with a plan to dispose of surplus metal and move forward with the plan if it is a financial benefit to the school district.
Okay, motion by Halsey, second by Costilla. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
I will abstain.
Okay, yes, so 6 in favor with Ms. Villalpando abstaining. That takes us to 7B. Ms. Hanson?
I move to deny Carolyn Roach's request to rescind submitted and accepted resignation.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Hanson, second by Cantu. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? 4. And opposed? Okay, so 4, 1, 2 abstentions, Costilla and McLaughlin. That motion carries. Okay, that takes us to item 8. Mr. Cruz.
Yes, so I was asked to come up here and do a presentation on the public comment law. You have some PowerPoint materials in front of you, so I'll just kind of go over the presentation. On the first page of the materials that's in front of you at the very bottom, as you see there, before this past legislative session, we did not have any law that regulated public comment in the state of Texas under the Texas Open Meetings Act. So moving on to the second page of your material, the bill that was introduced is House Bill 2840. House Bill 2840 now has a new section 551.007 of the Texas Government Code. The first thing that it addresses is what you see there at the very bottom of your materials, which is addressing the board. Now the law requires that before the board considers an item on their agenda, that they has to give the public an opportunity to speak before or during the consideration of that item. There has been a lot of talk about this because people, especially superintendents, have asked me, well, do we have to take all of the action items and put public comment before it or before the informational items? What does it mean? Well, we do have some guidance, and if you turn the page, we're relying on a Texas Supreme Court opinion that you see there, and in there, the court kind of defined what consideration means. The court said, quote, when the majority of a public decision-making body is considering a pending issue, there can be no informal discussion. There is either formal consideration of a matter in compliance with the Open Meetings Act or an illegal meeting. So basically, our advice to school districts is that really the word consideration should be before anything that you're going to be discussing, receiving information on, whether or not there's action. So it should go before, public comment should go before your informational items and before your action items. It should be kind of, you call the meeting to question, you do, your, Pledge of Allegiance, so on and so forth, and get the public comment out of the way right away. I did have board, and the reason why this is an item is because there are some boards that I work with that really had public comment until the end of the agenda. That has never been the practice here, but we did have that, and that's the reason why you have that specific language in the code now. Time limit and speaker limits, it's there at the bottom. And you all know that before we had restrictions, right? We were not gonna be having, if there's 50 people that would come to public comment, we were not gonna listen to all 50 of them. Now we have to, because the law says that you can't group them or have people delegate a certain spokesperson. That is already out of the rules. Now, what the law does allow you to set reasonable time limits. So if you have, for example, 3 minutes, 5 minutes per speaker, you can reduce it based upon the number of speakers that you have for that night to 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute, because we're not gonna, no city council, county commissioners court, or school board is gonna be at a meeting where they do nothing other than public comment, right? So on the next page, what about public criticism of the board? That the law does say that it cannot be prohibited, but there has to be basically criticism with respect to following the First Amendment. And I have some First Amendment basics on the next page for you. As you know, the First Amendment applies to all Texas public school districts, and we do not inhibit, the First Amendment freedom of speech either at a public board meeting or at other places. But we do have limitations with respect to forums. And you do have there at the very bottom the types of forums. You have basically three types of forum. You have the traditional public forum, you have your limited public forum, and then you have your non-public forum. The non-public forum is the easiest one. That's the classroom, right? We're not gonna be able to talk about burning of the flag and stuff like that because teachers have to teach social studies, so we don't really allow just anybody to walk in there and espouse their views. The second one is the open public forum, which is basically sidewalks, streets. That's where we have our protests around our country, right? So that is, we cannot restrict it at all. What we have here, and the courts have said that the public comment policy is governed by the limited public forum. So the limited public forum, it's basically as the word connotes, right? It's limited. You can have, and then the next page you have there, in terms of limited public forums, allow boards to basically set regulations so long as they don't discriminate on the basis of your viewpoint. So for example, if you allow somebody to come up here and talk about how great your geometry teacher is, then you can't come up, then you can't, if another speaker comes up and then says, no, this geometry teacher is not good, we're not gonna allow that. Once you allow it for one, you have to allow it for all because you cannot discriminate based upon their viewpoint. So, but what can you do if somebody has a challenging of a complaint? Like for example, tonight that you all heard a complaint in closed session, right? You, at the very bottom, it says you direct the speaker to follow the grievance policies. And we have policies for students and parents, F and G. For employees, you just heard one, DGBA. And the third one that you have is for your public, which is GF. So there, if they do have a complaint, you want it to come up through an orderly process. The next page is recommendations of public comments restrictions. Now, you don't have to allow, just because you allow speakers, you can't allow them to come up here and use profane language, obscene language. That the board president can say, no, you're out of order. You continue with that. We're gonna ask you to refrain or be escorted off the podium. What about time limitations? There is a specific provision if people are gonna be speaking Spanish. So if you have, for example, somebody that comes up here and speaks, the English speakers get 3 minutes. If you're going to have a Spanish speaker and they're gonna need a translator, then you give them 6 minutes. You have to give them basically double time. On the next page, what kind of comments do we get? Do we get comments that relate to the agenda or other comments as well? The law basically says that you basically can restrict your public comments to only agenda items. So if, for example, the cheerleaders are not on the agenda, then you cannot comment on items that are not on the agenda. But that is a policy for the boards. I have boards that restrict it to only agenda items, and I have boards that basically welcome anything dealing with district business. There is an Attorney General request. This is the only Attorney General request that was filed on October 25th, 2019. And it's basically asking, the Blanco County Attorney submitted a request for an opinion asking basically when, in terms of public comment, it says that we have to have it before or during. This particular person felt that basically they had 21 items on the Commissioner's Court agenda for Blanco County, and that the Commissioner's Court were required to hear him at each and every agenda item. As you may believe, the Blanco County Commissioner's Court disagrees with that, because if you allow that for one person, then the question is, can you restrict public comments to only a certain portion of the agenda at a certain time limit? That's the question before the AG's office. Our opinion is that yes, you can. You can set reasonable rules that basically says you're not gonna have at each and every agenda item. You're gonna have it at the very beginning, and that's at the only time that the board is gonna have public comments. And then you also have, in terms of limiting the right of people to speak in terms of the amount of time, that is also a reasonable regulation that can be had. So that's my presentation on the public comment. It's not really a long law. We obviously, because we just began implementing this September 2019, we only have 551.007. And the reason for this, I do want to tell the public and you all as well, this new section of the Texas Open Meetings Act does not arise out of school district issues. It arose basically out of a city council that in a part of our state was not allowing public comments at the beginning. They were allowing at the very end, and they had very basically onerous restrictions for allowing the speech to get out there. So because of that, one legislator thought that, you know what, we don't have a law relating to public comment, let's put one in the books. 2840 is passed by the legislature, and now you have it as part of your Open Meetings Act under 551007. Do you all have any questions for me? Yes, Kathy?
So we need to make revisions to our current policy.
Correct. So what the yellow material that I have in front of you, it's the one that Marcy just gave me. That's basically what TASB has kind of put out there. And they're going to give you options. I think you need to work with your policy consultant from TASB. They'll give you the recommendations. But yeah, certainly you should probably make sure that your policy is updated for sure. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think so. Right now, you already have public comment, and obviously, you're not, in any type of violation. Just make sure that when you come up with a policy, it's something that is in line with the presentation I give you. You should be. It's not going to be too many revisions, to be truthful,
we just
because
need
I've
to-
been working with other
We
school
need to
districts.
revise the part about grouping.
Grouping for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Something about the quorum, right?
What?
Under our agenda items, public comment.
No,
Yeah.
we,
Yeah, you have it at the
And
very beginning.
initially,
we don't have to have it after each agenda item
We're
or
okay
before.
leaving it.
As long as you have it at the very
beginning of the
beginning.
meeting, we're covered.
Mhm.
We just can't force them to go into, elect one person to speak.
Right.
Only done it once.
Well, we need to take it out of policy.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
All
Mr.
right.
Cruz.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night. Merry Christmas to everybody.
You as
Thank
well.
you, thank you.
Okay, that takes, Mr. Arredondo.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. If there are no objections from my colleagues, I would respectfully request that we move up item 11B.
Any objections to considering 11B at this time? All right, no objections. We'll do it. 11B, consider approval of youth service position not to exceed $20,000 per year for 2 years. Is there any presentation, or are we just sharing what we know about this and voting? Do they want to talk? Do one of y'all want to talk about this position? Okay.
yes, he does.
Always welcoming our partners from City Hall.
Y'all want to tweet about him right now?
Have at it.
Right. Well, good
At
evening.
me though. Don't just leave it out there. Don't be a coward.
Right. Good evening. My name is Drew Wells. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of San Marcos. And with me, I have Jessica Ramos, who is our Youth Services Manager for the Parks and Recreation Department. So we really don't have a presentation prepared for you tonight on this agenda item, but we are here to answer questions about the program and the initiative that we are trying to get support for. But I can provide just a quick little brief summary, and then if there's questions from that, please don't hesitate to ask. So this position is the purpose of it is to try to implement the youth master plan that was adopted in 2013, and the core four entities that are supporting this initiative are the school district, of course, the City of San Marcos, Hays County, and then Texas State University. These four entities have gotten together and have seen a need and a desire to create a position that will be focused on implementing the different components and aspects of our youth master plan. And what we thought we would do is contract with a nonprofit organization, Community Action, for them to have this position in their area to implement this. How we were structuring this is that the city would fund half of the expense, and then the other three entities, the school district, the university, and Hayes County, would fund the other 50% of the program equally. So that's why the portion is not to exceed $20,000. The city of San Marcos would be the contracting entity with Community Action, and then we are developing that contract right now, and then we hope to have that here in the coming weeks prepared, and then in that contract we'll kind of spell out what the deliverables are, what we expect for them to provide back to the Core 4 group. And then on the back end, what we are doing, the city of San Marcos, is that we would have a memorandum of agreement with each of the other three entities to basically spell out how we would fund this position and the programs that Community Action will enact on our behalfs. So that's kind of a brief summary of what the program is, and then again, Jessica and I, we would be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I have a couple. Have the county and university approved an allotment of $20,000 per year for 2 years?
The Texas State University has approved that. The county, I do not think that they have considered that, the Commissioner's Court, but I know that they are generally on board with this initiative, but I cannot answer that.
Okay. And Ms. Castillo?
So the city would pay 50% of it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you all would be, who would be responsible for the hiring?
Well, at this point, we would be looking to Community Action to actually hire this employee, and it would be their employee, and then the Community Action would contract with the Core 4 entities to deliver, you know, the
So they basically would be overseeing, monitoring the person that would be, we would just be providing, if we went that direction, $20,000 per year.
That's correct. They would be supervising that employee, and then the employee would be working with the Core 4 entities in various capacities, and then also be working with the Commission on Children and Youth
They would
to.
be meeting with somebody from our entity.
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding
And then we.
roles and responsibilities, whatever that needs to be done.
That's correct, and we'll be pretty specific in what those deliverable items are, various reports, and then just that they will be reporting back to the school board, to the school
So
district,
each entity
or,
would have a contact person, but this person would be working. If it's part of the school, and we're paying some of the money, there's some impact, some feedback and input here that we would be.
oh, correct, and yes, and before we execute the contract with Community Action, we will make sure that the school district, the county, and Texas State, that they will see the language within that contract to make sure that your interests are in there, and then there will be a mechanism for Community Action to report back to the Core 4 group to ensure that those interests are being met.
Okay, so you would
And-
provide input into the MOU, or somebody?
We have provided input to the MOU, and this position would actually coordinate with the Commission on Youth, which Trustee Halsey and some of our district personnel are a part of. And they're kind of like, we can't do, this person would do for the 4 entities, like if we have an issue with a student that is above and beyond, they will help intervene.
Yeah, so this is a recommendation that came from the commission originally up through the council and then to the Core 4. And the original idea was that there are some programs that don't lie entirely within just one of those domains. And so you have to have a real concerted cooperation between those entities in order to do them. And so the first 2 initiatives that this person would be charged with bringing forward would be a community-wide mentorship program. So I know that we have started at the high school through the Gear Up a mentorship program, but it's trying to do that more expansively throughout the community so that it goes beyond just the Gear Up cohort. And the other one would be to bring forward a community-wide mental health initiative that pertaining to the positive mental health of our youth. Again, we have a lot of resources within the district, but tying those into something that is more broad-based across the community and more encompassing of businesses and parents and first responders, and sort of bringing everybody together to ensure that we are doing all that we can to provide for the positive mental health of our kids. So.
And then just further background, when we met with the county, city, and university, that's when we first saw a subset of the board. I think it was me and you. That's when we first saw the early job outline, and we gave some feedback, and we were expecting that to be revised and be a little more specific than it was. And at that time, I didn't know how. I can't say, oh, the school board supports this, because we got to vote and there's 7 of us. But I did commit to putting on the agenda, which I have done, and so that's why it's here tonight, because I think they needed some direction. In my office of serving on that group, that's how it came here. That's what I know. Individually, I think it's quite a bit of money. Was there a market study that said this type of position should get paid 120 grand, or how did that happen?
Well, and this is a not to exceed amount. We have had, since the meeting, the Core 4 meeting, we have had meetings with Community Action to discuss the dollar amount, to make sure where it is, how it would fit within their organization. And it's not only for the salary. There's a little bit of expense for overhead and for some programmatic expenses and so forth. So we're still having those discussions to nail down the exact dollar amount, but we do not. It will not exceed, for what the school district's portion, more than that $20,000 amount. And we felt that we needed to at least commit to a 2-year period to, give them an opportunity to get the person in place and to get them acclimated to the community and what the job is, and then. And to give them a little bit of time to get it up and running. So we want it to be a 2-year term initially.
Okay. Well, are there other questions, comments, concerns from anyone? None? I guess individually, I really like mentoring and obviously support every mental health thing that's come before this group that I can recall, but I don't know if another government employee is the best solution for either of those, and it seems like a lot of money. So I haven't decided how I want to vote, but I will entertain a motion.
We'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
Arredondo, motion. Cantu, second. Any further discussion? All in favor? 6 and opposed. Motion carries 6-1. No, I opposed it. Yes, 6-1. All right, so that takes us back, I think, to the superintendent's report, yeah?
Yeah.
No, we're gonna go with,
We're just wildcatting this thing.
yeah, we're.
All right.
You didn't get
Popcorn
my
reading.
text.
Okay, tell me.
He was going to go after Shaq.
Put it after the.
Okay, academic update.
He goes after the shake.
Report item 9A1.
Gotta go.
All right.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. We're going to begin with our, I know that was loud, I apologize, with our 3 informational items, the GT update, our extracurricular update, and then our SHAC update.
Didn't tell him to.
Good evening, school board members. I'm Debbie Smith. Can you hear me? Coordinator for Advanced Academics, GT, and a couple of other things. So I'm here to talk about the GT and AP update tonight. As you know, we redesigned our district model about 3 years ago, and we did it with the idea that we wanted to do 2 things. We wanted to increase our whole school enrichment and give a lot of kids others opportunities, and we wanted to stop doing just a pull-out system that would create gaps in learning for our identified GT kids. So that was part of the driving force. So we have a tier 1, which is rigorous instruction in the regular classroom, Pre-assessment would lend opportunities for students to participate in Tier 2, which would be possibly a pullout with a GT teacher because they've demonstrated the learning that was going on in the classroom. It could look like a push-in, but they would do extended learning, some kind of project-based learning. It could be problem solving, it could be critical thinking, it could be a lot of different things depending on what they decide to do. And then Tier 3 would be an independent study opportunity. We've also increased the school-wide enrichment opportunities through academic UIL, science fair, and some other things, and all of the GT specialists kind of help with that. So this is just a slide that shows you some of the things that our GT specialists at the elementary level facilitate and or coordinate. Academic UIL, GOB, there's a whole list of things that they do, and there's really only a couple of things that are strictly GT kids. All of the other things include all students for that whole school enrichment. These are some pictures of our kids participating in Makerspace, the regional science fair, and then showing some problem solving and collaboration through the STEAM and STEM activities where they're trying to stack the cups and stuff. The instruments that we currently use for GT identification are map growth. A couple of years ago, you charged me with screening grade levels. We screened K, second, and fourth with portfolios. And we did pretty good finding kids that needed to be referred that had not been referred, and we did refer a lot of kids ourselves. This MAP screener has given us a really, really great opportunity to screen all grade levels. So we used that this year, and the recommendation is 95 percentile in reading or math. We felt like we would miss kids if we stuck at 95%, so we looked at 80% and above to make sure we didn't miss kids that might need to be screened. Then, of course, we do an achievement test, which is the Iowa. Raven is an ability test. The SIGS stands for Scales for Identifying Gifted Students, and it looks at categories with a Likert scale. Teachers fill it out, parents fill it out, and it looks at several categories: creativity, general intellectual, leadership, and then just the specific academic areas. We still do a portfolio for creativity for K through 5, and then we have a student interview for secondary kids. These are our current numbers by school at the elementary level. And our secondary, there's by school. And then looking at our demographics when you break them down, if you look at the chart at the bottom, it says GT, the ratio from GT to district is 10% are identified. That's really pretty much in line with what a lot of districts do. The Hispanic and Latino ethnicity, that percentage is 61% of the ones that are identified. Our special ed is at 1%, 504 is 3.5%, EL 7, and EcoDis is 39%. We have increased in many of those categories from years past. We still have some work to do because ultimately we would like those numbers to mirror the demographics of our district or get as close to that as possible. That's also what the state plan wants us to do. But we've kind of tweaked our testing as we go to try to bring in more qualitative evidence, because when you rely too heavily on just quantitative evidence, it's really hard. You're going to miss kids that way, especially some of those special pops that are difficult to identify anyway. And it's actually a statewide, nationwide problem with certain subpopulations. So the state of Texas in House Bill 3 came out with some stuff for gifted, and they want you to identify areas where you need to improve and then create a deficiency plan. The things that I would like to focus on or to increase, or we're going to focus on as the district, is to increase opportunities for school-wide enrichment on all the campuses. We're doing a good job, but I think we can do better. Expand our qualitative testing piece so that we can have those numbers mirror the district's testing percentages. And then increase our opportunities for the social emotional GT-specific learning. And then moving to AP, our current demographics show that we have a total enrollment of 519 unique students. Of that group, there are 304 that identify with Hispanic Latino. We have 10 that are in special ed, and you can see the rest of the numbers there. So we feel like this does demonstrate we do have open access, and we do encourage open access to AP. There's still some work to do, and there's still some students we can look for. One of the things we do is use the AP potential report from PSAT to kind of help us find kids and funnel them into that sooner. We brought in laying the foundation training for teachers last year to kind of help with pre-AP and AP in math and language arts or English. And we send teachers to training on a regular basis in the summer on a rotating basis, because at one point we were getting reimbursed every other year for teachers for training. That practice stopped this year, but we typically do it every other to every 3 years that we try to send teachers. And we actually have some extra teachers trained that aren't currently teaching a section, just so we have some backup and we can grow our teachers.
Just on that slide before you say unique students, so you mean if they are in 4 classes, you counted them once?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions? Ms. Hanson?
Back to the GT identification instruments, which is page 8 of our, on the SIGs, is there a parent meeting to discuss how to, I mean, because if you have a GT kid, what they do may seem normal because that's what you see every day. But compared to the others, which you may or may not have the opportunity to compare, you know,
Right.
so they may be rated lower by the parents if they don't have some kind of information.
We have a parent information at every session, at every campus in the beginning of the year. We have to have it in the fall before we open our referral period. And at that time, one of the things that we talk about is the SIGs and how important it is. In fact, this year I really implored parents, and unfortunately not all the parents come, so we're going to try and follow up with, we send home an information sheet and encourage them to call and contact the GT facilitator when we send that out, because our teachers can do it online, but our parents still have to do it on paper. So we will encourage them to ask, because not only that, but if they only have one child at home, they don't have a point of reference to really assess them.
Okay. And then, unless somebody else, on page 9, what are the plans to increase enrollment, especially at Mendez and Rodriguez? I mean, not enrollment, but placement.
Placement. Well, I looked at that too. That troubled me when I saw that there were 20 students. So I did some work there, and some of those students that were there, we had been hovering around 40 students over the last few years. We had several students that withdrew. Some of those students did move on to middle school. We had several students that transferred to other schools within the district. One of them was Rodriguez, that we lost some to Crockett and DZ. Even some of the new ones that we identified, we had 2 of those withdraw, 2 went to Rodriguez, some were identified for middle school because they were 5th graders, and then we had 1 go to Bowie and 1 to DZ. So we definitely know that's an area where we want to encourage the makerspace. Our GT teacher works with all of the students on a regular basis trying to grow those. I've asked my GT teachers on every campus to use that MAP growth number, and we also have a thing called Fraser's tabs, which is just kind of an observation piece. And I've asked them, when you've got a student that you feel like you've worked with and they weren't referred for any reason, go in and use those tabs and do some observations. We're trying to limit that so that it's not 100 kids they're having to look at, but really using the tools that we have to make the best decisions. But we want to make sure we're getting kids that don't otherwise get referred. So we're looking at all the different ways that we can do that.
Ms. Castillo?
And I'm gonna follow up on her question regarding the Mendez and Rodriguez numbers. We've had this conversation before. And I think that for me personally, it has itself a great concern. Because you look at Crockett Elementary, and I think we were talking about the GT teachers that are in, how many GT teachers do we have?
7.
Okay, so is there one in each of the campuses?
Yes, ma'am.
So we do have one that is, the composition of the GT teachers, or is it a diversified group of GT teachers? Is it, or we have all Anglo, we have Hispanic teachers, we have African American teachers, do
Well, I can go through the whole, at Mendus, we not only have a GT teacher, but she's bilingual certified as well. And at Rodriguez, we have a GT teacher that is actually Asian. At Travis, we have a bilingual GT teacher. At Crockett, we do have an Anglo teacher. At Bowie, we have an Anglo teacher. At Hernandez, we have a Hispanic bilingual teacher. So it's pretty diversified.
Well, it takes me to the six that you make reference to as far as, when you're meeting with parents for the effort to meet with parents. Because most of the parents, I mean, if you're looking at a school district that's primarily close to what, 75 Hispanic population, or a subgroup that is in that category, and we're gonna find, we have several parents that probably don't really fully understand the process.
Right.
What steps are we taking to maybe address this with these parents, so they can maybe understand it and maybe take more of an interest? If the parent doesn't understand it, they're not really going to understand it, and they're not going to know what to do.
Right.
Or what is the process here? What does it mean for my student, my child to be considered under this category? And I think this has happened to be the key issue that impedes maybe those numbers getting up, is that key of communication, of communicating with that parent. So what are we doing? What is our staff doing out there to increase that communication with our parents?
Well, I think one thing that we're doing as a district is we're trying to work more closely with our bilingual education department and make sure that, we've got some bilingual coaches that are very involved at the elementary level and the other levels. And so we try to work with them. We start with the parent meeting that we have to have. We have translators there. And then we follow up with those parents that when we have to refer kids, because parents did not, we have to send home and explain to parents why are we referring their children. And sometimes that involves a conversation to really explain what we're doing. We're open to doing whatever we actually have the resources and manpower to do, because it is like I said, it's a statewide, nationwide issue of equity and identification. So we want to find these kids. We need to find these kids.
Well, I think like I said, the communication is gonna be the piece that's going to, how to overcome that, because that parent needs to understand it, and not only in the English language, but in the language that they're familiar with.
Right.
Otherwise, they're not going to understand that.
And I think it helps that we do have some bilingual GT teachers in place in some key areas.
Ms. Kentum?
She's covered most of what I was gonna ask.
Okay. Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, thank you. I have been watching the changes take place, and I really appreciate them. I think both of the elementary campuses, especially with the implementation of the UIL programming throughout the elementary campuses, has made a significant difference. And the curriculum changes and the integration of the ELA program at the middle school is really great.
Thank you.
I share concerns about how we're identifying and ensuring that there's equity in the identification process, but I just want to make sure to also, I mean, at Rodriguez, we have a significantly smaller school there, so
Correct.
the numbers we wouldn't expect them to be, I mean,
About 8%, 8.something% right now.
right, so they're not at full capacity yet, so presumably that number would increase as that school population increases. And then for Mendez and the other schools that have the dual language program, I just want to make sure that I understand that, for instance, at Crockett, there's no dual language program.
Correct.
So students that are in the dual language programs at the other 4 campuses, we're not also having, those dual language students are not also in GT, right? We're considering, what I think I was told before is that dual language program is the GT program, but those numbers don't count to that. Is that right?
Well, you still have to identify the students through
Okay.
PEENS. So if they're in dual language, they can be in dual language and be identified GT, but they don't have to be identified GT to participate in dual language.
Right. But so
So there's overlap.
These numbers include everyone that I would find in eSchool through our PEENS system. So that would include kids that are sitting in a dual language program. Yes,
does
ma'am.
that mean that they have gone through all of those students have gone through all of those tests to be identified, or that they've just been identified because they hit the 80% or the 85% on the map? Like, what's the?
The ones that you're looking at on that slide were identified last year.
Okay.
They're currently being served. We're just starting our testing season in January.
Okay.
And so those are the students that we were able to look at using map growth to find those kids that had not been referred by parents and or teachers.
Gotcha. Great, thanks.
Oh, Ms. Hanson.
Looking at the demographic page, I just want to make sure that all teachers, and especially teachers, special education students and 504 students, are receiving training on how to identify these students, whether they're dyslexic or learning disabled or other health impaired especially, but all students that fall into those categories, to make sure that we're selecting those kids too.
One of the things I'm trying to do in training through our nature needs is to help them understand that when we're looking at students and for terms of identifying for GT, we're looking at strengths, not deficiencies. And so that's a process that takes time to teach that and for them to understand, because teachers want to fix what they need to fix, and that's what they're working, you know, with struggling students. And so those that don't have experience with GT yet learn that there's a different way to look at kids.
Okay, thank you.
Sure,
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Mrs. Smith, thank you for this presentation. Similarly, like my colleagues, their comments about Mendez's numbers are concerning to me. As someone who has advocated for full-time GT facilitators at every campus, an argument was made, we don't need them at every campus because the numbers are so low at some of our campuses. And at that time and during that conversation and dialogue, I said, well, if we have a full-time GT facilitator, those numbers will go up. So seeing the numbers as is concerning to me. In my day job, I have the opportunity to see, you know, all Mendez second, third, fourth, and fifth graders, and I can assure you, and as you know, there are very gifted students at Mendez Elementary School. So I look forward to whatever strategies or plans are going to be put into place to increase identification at that campus, because those students are there. I know we all know they're there. Obviously identifying them is the next step, but thank you.
I agree, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we are going to item 9A2, extracurricular academic performance.
Good evening. Is this, can you hear me? All right. Good evening, President McLaughlin, members of the board. That's okay. Superintendent Cardona and members of cabinet. My name is Denisha Presley, and I'm the proud principal of San Marcos High School. Our purpose tonight is to share with you where we are with extracurricular participation at San Marcos High School. And then I've also brought along some friends who will help us talk a little bit about our college career military readiness initiatives at San Marcos High School and what we've done from August to date to support our students. I want to take you back about almost 10 years where budget cuts, where the state cut our budgets. And there was almost a $5 billion budget cut. And in that time, the conversation came about in many districts, and ours included, on what are we going to do to continue to serve our students. Part of that conversation turned into, well, we'll cut out extracurricular activities. That conversation didn't happen in San Marcos, and it was happening in surrounding districts. And so the highlight was we want to take away fine arts. That was the first thing that people zeroed in on. So as those conversations were happening, there was also an influx of research that came out about the importance of extracurricular activities and the impact that it has on our students and our school culture. And so what the research findings were is that students who are involved and connected on their campuses have a higher likelihood of higher academic achievement. In turn, it also has a positive effect on your school culture, which includes students who may not be
engaged or enrolled in some of your extracurricular activities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are as a campus, and then I'll ask Coach Soto to come in and talk about what we're doing to remedy some of the gaps that we might see. So currently we have 2,256 students who are, these are names on rosters. So we do understand that there may be some overlap in students who are maybe in athletics or band and also in National Honor Society. Right now we don't have a strong platform to track students, so the data that you see tonight was manually aggregated for the purpose of this presentation. And while going through that process, we're also looking at some different platforms that might be able to help us better track our students in the future. We are currently on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we do offer late transportation for our students. Mostly it's students who are staying for academic enrichment or tutoring. We want to be able to offer more days. In the moment we're paying $210 per bus per day, and if you factor in anywhere from 2 to 4 buses, Doug can give me an exact on, it fluctuates depending on the number of kids that need transportation. It can get pricey rather quickly. So that's something that we want to improve upon, and it is a work in progress. So if you go back to the slide where we talked about the over 2,000 students that are involved in extracurricular activities at San Marcos High School, or names on rosters, we extracted our athletes. That's our largest. Over a third of our campus, or approximately a third of our campus, are enrolled in athletics. That's 648 students. We want to, so we're using that group as our big conversational piece tonight, because that is our largest elective on campus. When we look at our instructional data, or our performance data, we see that 43% of our students scored meets or better, and 66 scored approaches or better. That's our whole school. So if you pull that 648 students, that large elective out, the kids that are connected, you can see on this next slide that students who are enrolled in athletics had almost a 20% or fewer students score below approaches, and almost a 10 percentage point higher in masters than those who are not enrolled. Of course, we know our district goal is to grow each student at least 1 year academically, and so we can't talk about EOC data without talking about student growth and progress. So as a campus, and remembering that progress is measured in English 2 and Algebra 1, so that's why you only have 2 subject areas represented here. Over half of our students showed expected or accelerated growth in English 2, and almost 90% of our students overall showed limited growth in Algebra 1. Here's where we saw an anomaly, because overall our students performed better in English, and so the research says if you are connected and engaged in extracurricular activities or participate, then you're more likely to perform better. What we saw if you would look at this slide, in English 2, students who were enrolled in athletics did not accelerate at a higher rate or progress at a higher rate as the students who are not. However, if you go down to the bottom, you can see our Algebra 1 scores, and you see that our students who are enrolled in athletics scored almost 4 times higher in masters than those who are not enrolled. So the purpose of data, of course, is to show us where we are, where we've been, and to help us rethink how we can move forward more effectively. And so I'm going to invite Coach Soto to the podium so that he could talk a little bit about what we're doing this year and how that's
how that's working out so that we can continue to improve our academic performance.
Appreciate it. You know, back in the summer, we were up here and we painted a picture, a vision of what the athletic advisory would look like, and this is kind of what it came to. Basically, we have 2 periods, 2nd period and 7th period, and we divided those periods up by team to be able to facilitate study hall and character training within those advisory periods. So basically, if you are a first period athlete, football, boys soccer, boys basketball, you work out through first period, and then you get into the showers and change about 15 minutes prior to the end of the period, and then you end up going to breakfast from 9:08 to 9:30, and at 9:30 all the books open up, all the computers open up, and we start a study hall with on Mondays it's football and wrestling, as basketball, cross country, and boys soccer go to some type of character training, or if it's close to grade report time, they may stay in study hall longer. And those groups change per day. So Monday, like I said, football, wrestling will be in the study hall, while boys basketball, cross country, and boys soccer will be in character training. And then Tuesday they switch, Wednesday they switch back, Thursday, and then Friday they're all in some type of study hall. So that's the way we kind of facilitate the morning 2nd period. Again, if it's a grading week where we've got an IPR coming out for eligibility or a 9-week course, they may stay in study hall the whole time. 7th period, the period before our 8th period athletic period, we go straight to study hall on that, and it's the same similar split, with the teams being split between girls basketball, volleyball, girls soccer, girls and baseball, and the other split being softball, tennis, swim, and golf. And again, they work a good 30-40 minutes in their study hall or character training, and then they go dress out for athletics, so that way when athletics starts at 3:12, they are they're getting their workouts begun at the time that the period starts. This has worked out well for us. It's also worked out well for the fact that we can bring in other entities and come talk to our kids. We've sent the kids to the Career Center to sign up for their FAFSA. We've sent them there to sign up for college entrance exams, ABSVAB testing, all these type of things. So it's just a good time for us to get our kids where they need to be throughout the sports, and then also get them the help that they need to prepare for EOC, to prepare for eligibility and 9 weeks test. Here we go. Right now, our average unweighted cumulative GPA throughout our 600 or so athletes is a 3.34, and our average weighted cumulative GPA is an 88.52, so we're pretty proud of that. That runs about the way it's been going for the last 7 years that we've been here kind of charting this. We're normally right around an 88. I think the lowest it's ever been is an 86, 87, somewhere in there. So right now, we currently have 177 students in 2nd period advisory and 130 students in 7th period advisory. There are some athletes that go to a 2nd period class and a 7th period class and are not in the advisory period. For some of them, it may be an Edgenuity class where they're catching up on credits. For other ones, it's a class that they need for their diploma plan. So there's quite a few kids, as you can see, in the advisory periods. Some different things that we've also used for our kids is something that our school put out was the road to EOC testing, and we use these dates to influence our kids to go to get the tutorials after school, Saturday, and in school also. So if we have time during that 2nd and 7th period, we usher them to those tutorials when we can, and we have our coaches influence them to go to do some of these tutorials for the EOC testing. Ms. Hernsberger got us a list of all of our athletes, so we know all of their EOC scores, and I've had each coach take out the kids that are in need of some help with tutorials for the EOC, so that way we can help influence those kids by any means we need to get them to tutorials, if you catch my drift. Additional tutorials that we have, The science was awesome. It was already set up, second and seventh period. So again, pushing those kids that need some science EOC tutorials or just tutorials in general during second and seventh period. The science teachers have a couple key teachers that work those tutorials during second and seventh that help us move those kids and usher those kids that way. English has a seventh period coach that he's a new coach to the district and teaches English. He helps out on Tuesdays and Thursdays with these kids. And then, of course, math and history have their tutorials set up after school, as you saw earlier. Last year, we've got most of our kids on the Khan Academy to help them kind of get a more acute area of studying, because on that you can narrow down to the objective what you need to learn. So we've used the Khan Academy also. As coaches, we've put them on those tutorials, and then also the teachers in our district have done that also. Thank you.
Coach, do you know which team has the highest GPA? Is it girls volleyball? I think they used to hold.
Girls
that high.
volleyball is pretty far up there. Right now, I would think it was them, but the ones that are always in the running is swim, golf, and girls volleyball.
Right.
But girls volleyball is they're nationally known with their GPA every year that they get recognized. I think the last 3 years in a row.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Castillo?
When, on the page, I think it's 25, athletic advisory tutorials.
Mm-hmm.
Are these mandated that they have to go, or is it just?
If their schedule allowed them to go to be in second and seventh period athletic advisory, then they're there. If their schedule didn't allow them to go because they needed a class, then they go to class.
So these are during class period times? I mean, I'm looking at this page right
Yeah,
here.
let's just double.
Some of them are during class period. I'm sorry, I was on
For an
the phone.
advisory period.
Some of them are during class, yes, and some of them are after school. Like if you look at the top, it says after school and then Saturday and then in school. The one on the right is in school. If we can get them there, we do.
What about the other ones? So there is not, it's provided to them, but they're not mandated to go.
Correct.
So if you have a student who's not doing well in, let's say in math,
Mm-hmm.
is there any possibility of making it mandated for them to go?
We are working on that. I had a meeting with the math, English, math, and science coaches to try to figure out something during second and seventh. We were already into the semester, so it was going to be too hard for them to kind of manage that. Science had already had it done, so we were good with science. So we're looking to that in the future. As you know, this kind of got in late in the summer, so we didn't have great planning with it as far as getting it set and getting it rolling. But we're working as we're going through it. We're learning a lot of different things, and we know it helps. So next year, or possibly in the spring, if we can, trying to get some tutorials during that second and seventh period is going to be important to us. That's how we got the English teacher. He was a coach. He had seventh period off. He said he could do two periods a week for us. So that's how we got that one. So we're constantly looking for those teachers that kind of can help us during that second and seventh period. If not, we have 4 to 5 coaches sitting with those kids, helping them with tutorials or with their own study halls. So we've got coaches that actively monitor and move around and help these kids with their studies.
Salzy?
Mr. Cardona, have we, in the past, allowed students to opt out of EOCs based on their PSAT scores and such, have we been doing that, and are we going to be doing that?
It has been allowed, but that's gone away for this year. The commissioner has ruled we can't do that because it's in violation of federal law.
So does that mean then that those students there who say a student was able to opt out of the EOC because their PSAT score was high enough that then we would see, and they were an athlete, we would see their grade point average reflected in that number, but we would not see their EOC score test reflected? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, are they in that data?
They are. Their EOC data would show up in the meets category
If they've opted out?
if they opted out using the PSAT.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Castillo, another question?
Ms. Presley, you mentioned in the very beginning of your presentation about the number of students, and you outlined athletic students, and I will ask about band. We have a large number of students, but we have 150 in band. I mean, the connection of students being involved and
Yes, ma'am.
very important. This is a very low number. And I think we should make an effort to to really outreach some of those students that would benefit from a program. I can remember years ago when we had almost 300 in the band program. I mean, and I'm talking about several years ago, not just recent, but there were quite a number of students. So I'm just somewhat concerned that we have a large number of students on this campus, but only 150 in band.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, we're trying to get our students involved and really be.
We used to have 150 that marched.
Something other than maybe not liking the
Yeah.
math or to math course,
That's way-
maybe they would be encouraged to, if they wanted to
That's
sing
way
band,
Johnny
be able
Martinez
to
was.
do that.
Right.
So both middle school band programs have significantly increased, and so we've now seen a slight increase in the high school band program, but we also offer other programs with the implementation of mariachi. If the schedule does not allow, but with the 8-period day, now students should be able to take band and mariachi or band and the additional electives. So now it's just a matter of making sure that we're scaffolding and siphoning the students up into the program. So there
Well,
wa-
I just hate the possibility of considering that, you know, this, and because I've been around band a long time with kids, it's like I hear the conversations that take place regarding, you know, you do a lot better in UIL if you have a smaller band. Sometimes.
No, that's not true. But-
Well, no, it's not.
So-
But what I'm saying is that it would be good if we could have more children, more of our kids
Yes.
involved in an extracurricular activity, whether it's mariachi, or whether it's band, regular band, or whatever, any of the athletic programs, you know, it's just, that's a low number, in my opinion, for me.
Okay.
Mr. Arredondo.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Mrs. Presley, what year is the athletic advisory period in? Is this its first year at San
Yeah.
Marcos High School?
Yes, sir.
What was the schedule like for student athlete last academic year?
Last academic year, they were on a 7-period day.
So
And
what
s-
was the length of that athletic period?
Were we 52 minutes?
2 minutes or 53 minutes.
So we've extended it to include, I guess, all the way up until 10:06 now? I'm just trying to get like the
The-
comparison
yes.
from year to year. So it was at 55 minutes and now we've extended it with the athletic advisory to 10:06 a.m.
Right.
And what was the, I guess, justification of extending that one cohort's time period versus English or science or history or what have you?
When we went to the 8-period day, we knew we were gonna have extra periods, extra electives. We offered it to other programs. We were the only ones that wanted to do it for sure, so we moved forward with it and kind of devised this thing as it was growing. And the main deal was to get our, you know, we asked to teach bell to bell in English and algebra and everything else. When athletics were the same way, we want to use bell to bell, but it's hard when you have to get dressed out, you got to shower, you got to get them breakfast and things like that. So that's how that second period evolved, and if we were going to do it for one varsity athletic period, we needed to do it for the other varsity athletic period, because technically, kind of the boys are in the morning first period, and then after school is kind of more outdoor, more of the girls' sports are in the 8th period. So we wanted equality there, so that's why we did it during second for the first period athletics, it is varsity athletics, and then the 7th before the 8th period athletics, which is a mixture of mostly girls but also boys' sports. So that's kind of the direction we headed with it. We wanted to be able to get them, a lot of us practice before school, so a lot of these kids weren't able to eat breakfast because they're starting practice at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was just kind of a good thing for our kids to be able to keep them involved, get them to practices on time, get the work out of the period that we needed to get, and then still get them into breakfast in the mornings. And the tutorial part of it has really proven to be, our kids really like it, because some of these kids are going on a Tuesday night and they're not getting home till 11:30 at night, 12:30 at night, and they don't want to do their homework. But they know they've got 2nd period or 7th period that they can sit there and get it done, and quite a few of them take advantage of it. And it helps that we have, you know, we have 4 coaches, basically 4 to 6 primary coaches in those study halls to help monitor, walk around, make sure the kids that are on task. So when, you know, the 10:30 or 9:30, whatever time, I think it's 9:30, rolls around, breakfast is put up and the computers come out, and we're walking around managing these kids, making sure that they're doing something that's academic.
I appreciate that information, Coach. So for example, on Monday, in our board packet in the presentation, it says, I guess, boys soccer, cross country. What time do they arrive for practice in the morning? If it says that they're eating breakfast from 9:08 a.m. to 9:30, what time did their day start on Monday?
If they're in season, take football and boys soccer. If they're in season, their practice is starting by 7 o'clock in the morning.
So
If they're out of season, like take, for example, the first 2 months of school, boys soccer was not in season. So they were able to, they start their period when the bell rings, okay? And they go through their full period, get their shower, and then some kids will eat before they start at 8:10, and some of the kids will just wait until the 9:08 to 9:30 to eat. It's just up to them on that.
So theoretically, in this example, as a student athlete, I could come in, start practicing at 7, go shower, change before 9, and go have breakfast by 9:30 and be done for the day with practice, my
Correct.
Athletic practice.
Yes.
I'd be done by 9:30.
Yes.
And based on administrative decisions, best practices, what you deemed prudent was to build in a 36-minute advisory period for student athletes to do either study hall or character training.
Correct.
And I guess the purpose of this information for me, one, is if that is a model of success for a cohort of student athletes, I know one of the concerns that we had moving away from mega lunch was that other students would not be able to be afforded those opportunities built into the school day of tutoring or extracurriculars when they can't get on the bus in the afternoon or the evening. So I guess if it works for a specific population of students, I would like to see it done campus-wide and what that would look like. If a daily advisory for tutoring and tutorials and character training, if all of those things are valued by San Marcos High School and the ISD, then every student should be afforded those opportunities as well.
We're doing the best to produce the best product we can and taking the data in as we go. Again, we're trying what we feel is the best for San Marcos kids.
Great. And so thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Arredondo. We have started a series of conversations with our students and our parent and teacher bodies to talk about ways that if we decide that we want to go in the direction of a mega lunch, then those conversations are starting now. Again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Tracking our students is difficult, and so if we are doing something similar, then we want to make sure that we can do it with fidelity and within a nice structured environment. We've looked at several different types of bell schedules, and there are schools who have mega lunch twice a week, and 3 days a week they have 2 or 3 lunches. So I think that's a conversation it's a conversation that's happening. It's certainly something that we want to consider. Just, we did double block a few English and Algebra 1 courses, so it's not strictly, but their situation looks a little different. So here's where content, we're staying on pace, we're going with everyday instruction, and then that second part of their period, their second block is more remediation and what additional supports do you need academically?
Thank you. And again, just to echo, I follow the coaches on Twitter. I see the character training that is being done with these student athletes, and I think it's phenomenal. I think it's extremely impactful. And again, if we could open up those types of opportunities and even those resources when it comes to tutoring and interventions that are built into the athletic advisory period to all students, I think it's evident in the data that this is moving the needle with that cohort. So again, whatever resources or support you need from myself as an individual trustee, know that it's there because clearly it's working with our student athlete population.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are we ready for the second part of our?
I mean, as ready as we're gonna be.
Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you, John.
The second part of our presentation, I've asked Ms. April Chapman Mustafa and Mr. Doyle to join me. We want to talk a little bit about our college career military readiness initiatives on campus. What you see in this slide is an example of a living calendar that's maintained in our college career military readiness center. by our CCMR advisor. This just captures September. She started planning this calendar in August, and so it stretches from August to June, and it's our May, and there are quite a few pages, so I just wanted you to have a sample of what one might look like. In August, we started working with our seniors, and actually we started working with our teachers to really stress the value and importance and impact that each teacher on our campus, regardless of what they teach, have on a student's college readiness factor. In September, we started with FAFSA nights, and those continue weekly and have continued weekly from September to now. I believe the last one is tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, last one for the semester. Senior survey, all of our seniors take the senior survey in September, and this data is used, or this information tells us which students want to go where after high school, whether they want to go to a technical school, a four-year college, enlist in the military, and we use that information to draw students into whichever specific advisory or presentation they might need to attend. In October, we continue with our FAFSA nights and the Hill Country College Fair and Senior Advisory, Senior Action Day, which was amazing. While our 9th through 11th graders were taking the PSAT, all of our seniors were in the 800 and 900 wings of the building, and they were able to interact with several different colleges and universities and advisors from those universities. We had recruiters from different branches of the military. Our SEL counselor had a couple of sessions where she helped students learn stress techniques or de-stressing techniques and time management and organization. We've also tested over 200 students in TSI, and 113 FAFSA applications have been submitted. At this point in the year, we also are at 53% of our seniors who have submitted their college applications. So we're on target for our 85% goal. College readiness for our 9th through 11th grade looks very similar to our seniors. However, the conversation is different when you're in the 9th grade. Again, we started with teacher in service. We also, our district sponsored an AVID conference, which was led by our district officials and facilitated by our own teachers, which was incredibly amazing. Gear Up has done an amazing work with our freshman students and our freshman parents. They started with a parent night in September and continue to hold what we call master's classes for our parents, both in October and November, and I believe we had our last one last week. Yes. And so that class is geared towards parents, and it's to help our parents not only manage their personal finances or learn ways to manage their personal finances now, but also to start planning for when your student is in college. What is that going to look like for a parent financially? And imagine the gift of being able to start planning in the 9th grade and not be caught off guard by the expenses of post-secondary education.
Good evening, board. The following slide showcases some of the activities that we are doing to help connect our students into the workforce. First, you'll see that our CTE department is heavily involved in our local business and industry through partnerships and also advisory committees. And we get those feedbacks from those industry, help shape our programs. Last year, we held a spring hiring event, and we look to have that again this year. The bottom picture you can see, we had a partnership with A+, and then also with Embassy, where we brought in for that hiring event HR reps to help teach our students to better understand how to build a resume and also how to interview and how to conduct yourself professionally in that interview process. Students were able to leave that session with that resume in hand and those skills under their belt. Again, we look to continue to grow that spring hiring event this spring, this April. Also, some other activities that we're doing is to always increase or have strong internship programs, but also increase those opportunities for our students. These are some of the internship opportunities, but not all. Our partnership with Embassy Suites, Epic Piping, local veterinary clinics. The picture at the top of the slide is a really interesting picture. The young man, it's kind of hard to see, holding the cat, actually went through our vet tech program last year, earned a certification, is now employed with a vet office who those two young ladies are now vet interns this year. And so he's helping to train our current students in the program. We also have partnerships with Hayes Nursing Home and also Seton ICU and Kyle. But again, we do have partnerships with the CTMC, and again, there's others out there. We also do a lot of career awareness events, our job shadow event that with our juniors and seniors, but we did open it down or push it down into our 8th grade level this year with great success to allow students to see career opportunities in different career fields that they can pursue as they move through high school and into post-secondary. We also have a Destination College and Career Day that we started last year at the 8th grade level. Again, we look to continue that at the 8th grade level, but also at our 9th grade level as well. And then also within all TEKS and CT courses, you have career exploration and career acknowledgement throughout all those TEKS.
Okay, and so before I go into the military readiness, I wanted to address one thing that you had mentioned about, Ms. Castillo, about increasing numbers. And so one thing that Mike and I did this year was that we met with our elementary counselors. Because one thing that we recognize is the importance of building capacity in our adults. The love of extracurricular starts when they're little. And so informing our school counselors on what those programs look like so that way they can better educate our parents and so that we can hope to increase some of those numbers. And so our goal is really just to build capacity in our adults because we know that our kids will ask, well, Miss, what is this about? Or I'm thinking about doing this. And so the better educated they are, the better we can inform our students and then increase those numbers as well. And so when we look at the military readiness, and so again, it's the look of how things have gone for this semester. And so in August, we had the National Guard come in to speak to the teachers about what does that look like, joining the National Guard and enrolling in the military. And so our goal would be to increase that by having the other branches come and speak to the teachers as well. Because again, the goal is to increase capacity in adults so that way our students look to them to be able to guide them. And so we want to make sure that they're fully informed on what enlistment looks like. And so in September, the branches of military were at Hill Country College Fair, and they were there to meet with parents and students to give them information about the military and inform them on what that looks like in the enlistment process. And then the other part of that is the ASVAB testing. And so we had about 105 seniors test for ASVAB this semester. And so they also received the career exploration interpretation. And so that was really huge because it's not just, ASVAB is not just about enlisting in the military. It's also about understanding yourself and potential careers. And so that was really key for our kids. And then we'll have it in the spring semester as well, testing for those kids. And then during Senior Action Day, military was there as well. And so November, and this is not just November, this is every single month. The military branches are there on campus to meet with students. And so one thing that our college and career advisor does is we did a senior survey. And so the kids identified areas of interest. And so if a student stated that they were interested in the military, she would ensure that, let's say if I'm interested in the Air Force, when they're on campus, she will ensure that they have an opportunity to meet with them so that way they can get the information that they need and learn a little bit more about military. And so personal graduation plan. So our 10th through 12th graders currently have a personal graduation plan on file. They meet individually with their counselor to update and modify that plan. And so the discussion looks like they're talking about courses for next year. They're looking at their endorsements. They're talking about their college and career plans. And then also 8th graders moving to 9th graders meet individually with their counselor to start that process as well. And having that conversation about endorsements is so key because we want the kids to understand what the program looks like. But again, moving that down to elementary so that way they can start to learn at a younger age what those programs look like. And again, that's just building capacity in our adults. And also, each senior and junior is assigned a mentor through the College and Career Center. And so the mentors meet with the kids to, again, have that discussion about their college and career plans. It's not just about college. And so we want to make sure that our kids are having those healthy conversations with adults so that they start their planning a lot sooner so we can support them through that process.
Okay, any questions? Thank you all very much for the presentation. This takes us to item 9A3, a SHAC Student Health Advisory Committee mid-year report.
I'll be brief. Good evening, Board Trustees, Mr. Cardona, and those in attendance. My name is Eduardo Rios. As co-chair of our School Health Advisory Committee with Jennifer Vogel, I will be presenting our mid-year review. In preparation for the 2019-2020 school year, for the first time, we did pre-planning in May of 2019, and I can say with all confidence that we are reaping the benefits of that planning. With this year's legislative session concluding, we were prepared for whatever came our way, in addition to the items that we identified and planned for last May. This allowed us to hit the ground running when school started. In fact, some of our working groups met before school started. We set 7 objectives for the 2019-2020 school year. As of this mid-year review, we have accomplished 5 out of those 7. The 2 remaining objectives will be covered in the spring 2020, and they are evaluating all the campus CIPs for SHAC requirements and evaluate emergency procedures. These 2 evaluation activities will yield items that may be included in the SHAC planning exercise this coming May to identify the new set of objectives for the 2020-2021 school year. So, what did we accomplish this fall? Our district suicide awareness event was held in October. Our Beyond the Talk program has been revamped, and delivery, with the coordination of our middle school principals who are here, will occur during the school day in May after our annual testing completes. Our fitness gram results were reviewed. The legislative updates were reviewed. And the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, otherwise known as the YRBS, was completed in November here at the high school. The results will be available in February 2020. And finally, SHAC did minor changes to the bylaws of SHAC to reflect a change in the name from subcommittee to work group. Any questions or comments before I conclude? Yes?
Thank you so much. I have a question about a couple of questions about the Youth Risk Behavior Survey.
Yes.
So did all students at the high school take that?
No, so working with the professor at Texas State, we wanted to get a sampling. So they targeted in a specific class about 200 people. He only wanted a sampling of 200 folks, but they did go through and complete the complete survey questions.
Terrific. I think this is great and long overdue, and I'm very excited to see that. And so I'm wondering when exactly we think that we're going to see those results, and if they will come forward to the board from SHAC with a recommendation on action.
It'll probably be included in our planning, but we're going to review them in February when we get them, and then probably figure out what we need to do with the information as we go through it. So we definitely will be presenting something. We don't know exactly what we're going to be getting just yet, but it probably will lead to some actions that SHAC will tackle for next year.
Because I think to our earlier action item on the moving forward of a community-wide position to oversee youth services, one of the real problems that we ran into on the Mental Health Coalition that sort of stalled us out for a little bit is that we don't have this data, so
Yes.
we're not sure where the interventions need to happen on a community-wide basis because we don't know specifically, like, is it this problem that students are having overwhelmingly, or is it somewhere earlier in the trajectory? And so I think this will be really critical in helping us identify that and figure out where to best intervene.
It's a significant accomplishment to
Thank you.
get that this year, so we're excited to get that information.
Just came to, go ahead.
Since we saw a copy of that questionnaire that was administered to students, were there any students found that were in dire need for counseling or help?
Well, since we haven't seen the results yet, they were actually compiled and the database was given to the professor and his team to go through and analyze. We don't know exactly if anything's showing obvious from that because we haven't really seen any of the results. It was all collected by the professor and his team, and it's going to go through and be analyzed and processed. And it was anonymous too, yes.
Okay. I was just concerned because there was some questions on there that would indicate serious need for help.
True, and I think the the anonymous nature of the survey also aided in some of the kids hopefully giving real answers.
Okay, thank you very much for
Okay,
the.
I'm not done yet. Just a
sorry.
couple of things. I'm almost done. This is the conclusion here. So no, really, there's two upcoming SHAC meetings in the spring, January 9th and March 12th. But I also want to say on March 7th, we're actually doing the SMCISD Health Fair. It's Saturday at 8 a.m. in the SAC. And happy holidays and safe travels if you're on the road. We look forward to our full year report in May. We're on track to meet all our 2019-2020 objectives, and this concludes my review.
Okay, thank you. Now, thank you.
Mr. President, members of the board, so I get to finish up, and my presentation's only about 45 pages.
Uh-oh.
Great.
But before I'll try and go through this real fast. So you've heard a lot of different talks about, it's really about systems that we're trying to put in place. Whether it's attendance, whether it's GT, whether it's identifying kids that we're missing. It's all really about systems. And it takes a while to put those systems in place. But just to put it in perspective before I begin, when I got here, we had about 230 kids in unique AP courses, and we're about at 531 in about 3 years. So just let that sink in. Certifications, like I asked Mike Doyle, like the number of certifications. Now some go for, credit for the state, I guess, and some we value. OSHA 10 is one I think that we all know kids need, how to be safe. And I think that was it was an enormous increase from when I got here, like from 100 to 500 and something. And then we talked about GT, we talked about dual language, we talked about early college, we've talked about AVID, we've talked about Gear Up. We've talked about many things. We haven't talked about the 5,000 out of our 8,000 kids, K-12 last year, that were on a college campus visiting. So it's not like we're not trying to do things. Sometimes it may seem like we become overwhelmed, but our early college cohort, which had about 52 kids, is also addressing Trustee Costilla's specific issue around kids that are economically disadvantaged, since 75% of them have to be economically disadvantaged. So it's an exact mirror of the district, and our cohort is pretty much an exact mirror of our district. So, we have done many great things to put systems in place. We have a lot of work still to go, but our teachers and our staff members are moving, hopefully with a greater sense of urgency. So we'll talk a little bit about accountability systems and what that actually means, like whatever that accountability system means. I'm not going to talk about A through F, but just whatever the accountability system is: attendance, tardiness, checking out textbooks and library books. Those are all like systems of accountability. And I want you to think about, what is it that we're trying to do as a system? Are we trying to vaccinate kids in the short term to be like well for a little bit of period of time? Or are we actually trying to get them to be healthy when they walk the stage, like they understand the full dynamics of being a career college military ready graduate? I think we would all agree we want our kids to be healthy and understand what it takes to be successful in life without remediation, right? And how we affect student outcomes in a positive manner. And we want all those systems to be aligned to achieve student outcomes at scale. Like, that's just the reality of our system, whether it's evaluation, accountability, budget, organizational, whatever it is, right? They all have to be in alignment. If they're not in alignment, we're going to get a bad graduate. or we're going to have a graduate that struggles. And what I'll say about this is it doesn't matter if we have a good organizational structure. If we are not all focused on student outcomes, climate and culture will eat everything I put in place. And that's just a reality. And I like to think about it in this term. We all know this, right? There's a hole in the boat, but the guy on the other end of the boat is just like, I'm glad that hole's not on my end, completely missing the picture of what it is that needs to happen. We're all in this together, from the board all the way down to the custodian. We are one system. And as our system goes, so go our kids and their outcomes. And any kind of system that we put in place, any kind of system, has to have a cycle of continuous improvement. It can't be that we ever have anybody in this district say we're satisfied with where we're at right now, or I've done my job. It just cannot happen. And so that cycle of continuous improvement has to have support. It does have to have pressure, whether that's a good pressure or bad pressure, and it needs to be very transparent. And I think in some of these cases, we have done a really good job of putting that stuff in place. In other places, we have still work to do, and it's work that's always iterative. We always reflect on what it is that we're trying to do, and then we change what we're trying to do to stay ahead of our kids. And so I just want you to see, this is the conversation that we had with our team leadership last week. This is the conversation I'm having with you, so that we're transparent and everybody in this community knows what it is we stand for. And what it is we stand for is student outcomes and ensuring that our kids are career college and military ready, all right? And I think you have seen from the high school presentation, from last week's presentation, from Deb Smith's presentation, from special education's presentation, we're all trying to align the system to meet our kids where they're at and then move them a minimum of a year growth as we go through, right? And we talk about the 3 C's, clarity, right? We put that out in data, 40% of whatever scored at a proficient level. We put that into context, and we might say, but the year before they were at 34%, and we gained 6. But the reality and the candor is, well, we only progress at 6% each year. It's going to take us a long time to get to 100%. So I just want that to be out there, right? We have all these conversations, and some of them they're difficult to have. It's easier for us to have conversations with kids about their data than it is for us to have conversations with adults about our data. And I was thinking about this, like, why is teaching, I always hear from community members about reading, math, writing in particular. Why is it so hard to teach reading, right? It's a simple math problem, really. Decoding and language comprehension equals reading comprehension, right? And we all know that with any simple math problem, anything times 0 is 0. And so I want y'all to think about that as I go through this. Anything times 0 is 0. And so I do have a couple of activities for you. Right, so if we can all just take a moment and look at this writing sample, and I'm going to read it, and you can read it too. The frogs in the well. One summer day, 2 very hot and thirsty frogs looked long and hard for water. At last they came to a well. The bold frog said, "Let's jump in." The careful frog said, "What if there isn't any water in the well?" The bold frog said, "Come on, we have nothing to lose. Let's jump in." Before long, the frog hopped away from the well, refreshed and no longer thirsty. Right? So as board members, you're sitting up there thinking to yourself, 1, why is he reading this out loud? 2, but I have a really good sense that Mr. Cardona can comprehend and can decode words because he did so relatively easy. But what happens if you can't decode words? Again, it goes back to anything times 0 is 0, and that's the system we're trying to fix. It gets a little bit more difficult, right? So if you want to read along or you want to read in your head, the giraffe is the tallest land animal in the world. From head to hoof, it is between 14 and 20 feet tall. That means a giraffe is taller than the roof in someone's kitchen, but shorter than the telephone pole in someone's backyard. One feature that makes a giraffe so tall, it's his very long neck. Another feature that's 4 long, anybody know?
Legs.
There you go. One last feature that makes a giraffe seem even taller is its long, slender, anybody? Tongue that allows it to grasp leaves at the top of the trees. Right? So we can decode. And you can see in this room, we have some cabinet members that I need to work with because they weren't in team leadership last week. But if we can't comprehend, again, anything times 0 equals 0. And this is why whenever I talk to principals in principals meeting, I talk about things like the work on the wall. And the basic, and Miss Seaton's sitting right there, and she can nod her head yes or no, decoding and language comprehension have to be both taught explicitly, systematically, and cumulatively. Much like math, they build on each other, right? And if we have a gap in any specific area, then we have a gap in our data for kindergarten, for 3rd grade, on-grade level reading, for 6th grade. And there's some interesting research out of the University of Florida Center for Reading Instruction that says that, you know, for 1st graders, decoding is the primary thing, right? That's why we want to expose kids early on. Decoding is really a predictor for reading comprehension, right? By grade 6, it flips. Language comprehension is really the predictor for being able to read, to comprehend, right? And grade 10 research shows that language comprehension is much more highly predictive of reading composition, right? And so it's important because that's really the world of academic language, right? And in order to build on reading comprehension, right, I've already said that instruction has to be explicit, systematic, and cumulative. Language comprehension is built by background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. And what does that look like? At the younger age, the more you expose kids to books about frogs or salamanders or whatever, then they are able to get a depth of background knowledge. On the right-hand side are books for older kids. And what that allows your brain to do is to branch off. If it's about frogs, they start understanding what reptiles are and what salamanders are and what alligators are, right? Strand, I talked about vocabulary knowledge, right? This sign may be ambiguous, right? For some of y'all, that's really funny, right? And why is it funny? Because you understand what the definition of the word ambiguous is. If you don't understand that, there's a problem, right? Language structures. This is one of my favorite. It actually just came out in something else. Duck, duck, goose. I don't feel like playing games right now, right? Again, this I talk to principals a lot. Look at the work on the walls. Look at the work that your children bring home, right? A good way to look at grammar and syntax is to look at writing and the work on the wall. Do they use subject-verb agreement? Do they use complex sentences? If the work is wrong on the wall, they probably have a reading comprehension problem, that student, right? And this is the point. Syntax and grammar are academic language. It is the language of school. Verbal reasoning, pretzel. Right? Why is that funny? Right? Y'all are all inferring. Why does he have a pretzel in his hand, right? Should have a bottle of water. But the ability to infer requires that we use text evidence and we have background knowledge. And I see our teachers shaking their head yes, which means I'm on the right track. That or they'll catch me after the meeting. And this goes to the literacy structures. We want our kids on the deep end. That's why earlier in the year I made a comment about different types of vocabulary. We shouldn't have different types of vocabulary. We should have the hardest type of vocabulary, and then we scaffold and bring the kids up so that they understand that type of vocabulary. And I want to leave you with this, and this isn't meant to disparage anybody or anything. It's data that I look at, and it seems like it might not be You will not be able to see this, but I'll talk my way through it. This is our San Marcos CISD library checkout for the year up through today. And I want to give a kudos to the elementary schools, all of them, for, you know, typically 6 to 10 books a year is what you want kids going into the library to check out. That's the research base. And all our elementary schools are on track. Crockett in particular, she wasn't even in her library for like the first 2 or 3 weeks of school. And she's like at 22,000 books checked out for their 600 kids. Now, it could be one kid checking out 22,000 books. I don't know that. It could be Trustee Halsey's child who reads a lot. I don't know that. I say that to say this does not also include the vast library, Lexile library that our classroom teachers employ in their class. They have Lexile books in their classroom that are their own. This does not include secondary schools who use one-to-one devices, so kids are reading on those. This does not include that, but if you want to know about the high school, I'll go ahead and tell you they've checked out 687 books for this semester. So that's, again, a piece of, but that's a book, right? That's a data piece. It's not what really is going on, because teachers are assigning things on their laptops, right? There's also books. There's AP is not included in this. There are textbooks not included in this. We understand that, but it's still, you should be checking out books. I end with this. Shaq's talked about this. Mr. Rios has talked about this, and this is something that we're addressing in terms of health and wellness of our kids. This is an issue. It's an issue that we're far behind on. It's an issue that Shaq will have to address so that the board can change its policy. In some cases, you know, our hands are tied. In some cases, if things come back as THC, it's a mandatory expulsion for kids. For the other things, I think our policy at some point is going to have to shift to become more restorative, more counseling, more social-emotional supports. There is an underlying cause. The good news is, right, if you look at it, less kids are smoking cigarettes. The bad news is they've increased in vaping, particularly around products. I put Juul here because that's the target of American Heart Association, right? But it, you know, we're probably, the national average says 26.7%. I know our athletic director took a survey of athletes, and they were about at 30% athletes that had tried vaping. That's our athletes. So, and I know some of those questions, I don't know if the vaping particularly was in the YRBS, but I think it was. So this will get us some better data, I think, that we all need to look at. You can see it's up 78% among high school students, 48% among middle school students. You know, what kids don't understand is that it's not risk-free. It hasn't undergone market review by the FDA. This is what struck me from the Center for Disease Control, was that a Juul pod, anybody know what the Juul pod is? The little pod contains the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes.
Wow.
A pack of cigarettes in a Juul pod, and some kids are going through 2 and 3 Juul pods a day. The effects that CDC, there's a lot of research around this. If you want to look up Center for Disease Control, they have a whole department on teen vaping. Got to hear the expert in the country, probably in the world, on teen vaping and what it does to teenagers in changing their blood structures, what the chemicals do to attach to the blood. It keeps kids from clotting the younger you are. I think what's scary is that it's been marketed to youth. And this is what's interesting, is the flavors mimic the flavors we all find in the grocery store. And the conversation with the American Heart Association, with superintendents from around the country and with leading experts, really kind of made me feel when I got back from that conference was like, we are way behind in addressing this. Social media, the power of social media, you can see this is data from American Heart Association. We have looked at things to address this, but education, quite honestly, I think the quicker we educate our community, the better off we are. You know, products, devices that you put in school, there's a lot of debate around whether they're effective, like smoke detectors in restrooms. They'll tell you they're effective. They still, the data's still out there. What I think we're doing is SHAC is taking this on with the American Heart Association. We have a lot of resources through the American Heart Association. Ms. Vogel actually knows as the Amy through the American Heart Association, who's going to be working with us on starting some community-based dialogues. We already do, many of our schools do the Healthy Heart Kids Challenge. That's a way. We have begun implementing this in some of the character ed programs that we're looking at, but we really need to take a more assertive approach in addressing this issue. And I'll leave you with this. I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus, whatever it is that you enjoy. I hope everybody gets rest. We have really worked hard. Our teachers have really worked hard this semester, really hard with the administrators and with all the staff in trying to move our district forward. But I don't know if everybody is going to be able to read this, but if you could just take a moment. Can y'all see that if you're closest?
Oh, my God.
Can you read that, some of y'all?
I can. I can.
It ruins the effect. I would say read it. Some of y'all have already started reading it. And then I'll tell you stop and read it from the bottom up.
Okay.
This was written by a 15-year-old student in North Carolina who really puts things in perspective. I'll send this to all the teachers. It's really good activity to do with kids. But it puts everything in perspective. And with that, I am done for the last superintendent update of the decade.
Very good.
Okay, that takes us to 10 consent. I'm gonna pull A. But otherwise,
Good job.
does anyone want to pull B or C? No? I can then entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items B and C.
Okay, motion by Arredondo, second by Halsey. All in favor? Right, and then let's handle these one by one.
Could we just see an update of our public forum policy in January? I mean, have it updated because it's incorrect the way it is.
Great.
That's right, that's right.
All right, so, anyone make a motion to approve the
I move.
minutes for the specially called meeting of November 4th, 2019?
I do.
I'll second.
Motion by Hanson, second by Arredondo. All in favor? 6, and one
I'll abstain.
abstention from Villapando. September 11? I mean, November 11, excuse me.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion by Cantu, second by Hanson. All in favor? 7, we were, all right. And then we had a meeting on November 18, 2019.
I move.
Okay, motion by Hanson.
I'll second.
Second, I heard Villapando. All in favor? 6, and one abstention by Cantu. And December 2.
I move.
I'll
Motion-
second.
Motion by Hanson, second by Cantu to approve the minutes of the specially called meeting of December 2nd, 2019. All in favor? 6, and I abstain. All right, that takes us down to the last item, Item 11A, consideration and possible action on ranking of offerors that submitted proposals for the SMCISD De Zavala Elementary renovations.
Yes, sir, we have received those bids. You have the rankings attached. It is for the board to consider those rankings.
Mr. West.
Why is one part highlighted?
Do you mean on this page here?
Yes.
The top two are calculated by formula, and then the bottom four are calculated by the committee. We each scored, submit our scores, and that's how the ranking is developed.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Arredondo, sorry.
Make a motion that the board approve of the ranking as presented and delegate authority to the superintendent or his designee to negotiate a contract with a top-ranked proposer for consideration and action by the board at a future meeting.
Motion by Arredondo, second by Halsey. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Ms. Hanson?
That we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn by
Second.
Hanson,
Second.
second by Villapando. All in favor? That's it.
All right.
Lord.
Really